Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to another AMA, which is a series we started on Showstudio where myself and other team members from Showstudio try and answer the questions that you pose on Instagram and on YouTube as directly, honestly, and as intelligently as we can. So I've got our editor, Mima Viglizia, with me here, and my second assistant, Tom. So let's go straight into this with the first question that came on a post that I did showing some skinheads from the 1960s, but all the skinheads in the picture were all black, partly because that's one of the huge influences that started skinheads in the 1960s was from the Jamaican Rude Boys. So that was one of the major influences that started skinheadism. It's a sort of mixture of two things. Skinheads come from, happens around 1967. Skinheads come from a mixture of British sort of white working class, the kind of the younger brothers of what were the mods, and the new influx of Jamaican and Caribbean immigrants, who sort of the young kids of those who were sort of in their teens and called Rude Boys. And they bring the music and the style and the sense of dress and everything else. And from the mods also, or the young brothers of mods also bring some of the sense of dress. And anyway, so that's where it starts from. And I posted a picture on my Instagram from somebody who often posts pictures of original skinheads. And when I say original skinheads, I mean skinheads between 1967 and 1972, when the cult actually first came through and evolved through skinheads, suede heads, smoothies, and right out into glam rock. So that's the most, that's the first part of skinhead, the first, I can't speak today, it's the first manifestation of skinheadness from 67 to 72. I came on it when I came back from, I've been living in Europe, I've been living in Paris and then in Brussels, and I came back to London in the beginning of the 1970s and found the tail end of it. I then later in the 1970s, there was the first skinhead revival, which started around 1976, and I became involved at that point. It's been a style I've always loved, clothes-wise and music-wise. So I've always sort of adopted elements of it or re-seen elements of it for what I wear. Anyway, so the question here comes from somebody called Mirabelle Starfish. And she writes, "Wowzers, they are so gloriously sexy. I want to ask you, do you think there is a female equivalent of this look that's equally sexy? This look is so sexy and it seems to be sexier on men. Is there another look that is always super sexy on women?" Yeah, of course, Mirabelle Starfish. There was a female counterpart to that. Skinhead girls were often referred to as sorts, but these are more sort of Jamaican Rude Boys. But there is of course, you just have to look back at old pictures from 1960s dance halls, and you will see how the girls are dressed. The skinhead style that got revived in the late 1970s, of which the first skinhead revival, was quite different. It took a very small part of the dress code and revived that. The dress code in the 1960s and early 70s was quite different and quite varied. And also the politics was quite different and quite varied, but it reflected pretty much the politics of working class Britain. The funny thing I think about skinheads and the skinhead movement is it was so widely ignored by the British media at the time. It was totally underreported, totally underdocumented, and really, there were very, very few things written about it. Yet it was how most, or certainly a lot, of working class Britain dressed throughout the 1960s. Young British working class, so the kids sort of between sort of 12 and 21. Anyway, but largely undocumented, but an incredibly rigorous style, incredibly, I think, fantastic way of dressing and fantastic way of dancing. So I hope that answers your question, but just go and dig out any old pictures of 1960s dance halls, and you'll find people dressed like that. Or follow people like Gregory Farmer Clothing, which is where I found this picture originally. Gregory Farmer Clothing is his Instagram site. Instagram page, is that the correct term?
Yeah,
no, Instagram page. So Gregory Farmer Clothing or Original Skinheads is another one I follow. There are quite a few out there that kind of try and document the real beginnings of skinheadism. I think for people who were involved with skinheads right at the beginning, they saw the revivals as pretty much a kind of sham, and we got more and more away from the original feeling of it. The original feeling was incredibly, sort of very smart, almost a sort of, the beginning, a sort of punk-like rejection of anything fashionable. People, the first skinheads would wear their kind of father's clothes, anything that wasn't at all fashion. But anyway, things get blurred and they're not that important, 40, 50 years after. But for people who lived through it the first time, they wear that as a sort of badge of pride. But it does get very mixed up, and the politics is very difficult to try and explain. Anyway, so we won't dwell too much on that.
Amazing knowledge of skinheadness.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Well, that's my favourite topic.
Yeah.
And then just somebody else, what brand's new? Also asked, same picture, also asked, what year was this? I think it's about 1967 by looking at it. It might be a little bit later because there's a fly-fronted Mac in the picture, which is a kind of later addition to style. I would have thought 67, between 67 and 69 would probably be the date of the picture. So, but it's a fantastic picture. So, anyway, moving on. So this is referring to this particular thing, AMAs that we do, and somebody called do__tang has written, at Nick Knight, at Showstudio, hello, thank you for your amazing work. So in the next AMA episode, would you please give us the young photographers advice on how to approach the magazines for photography jobs? I'm fully aware that to shoot for a magazine is a very different approach compared to applying for a job in other industries. So I need advice on how to do it properly and successfully. And if it is possible, please take a look at my Instagram and give me some comments on how to develop a better portfolio. Thank you very much. So Mima, you were the editor of Lula magazine. How would a young photographer best approach you?
It's hard to say because some photographers, they just send you stories. And usually I can tell you there are very few magazines that accept stories that they haven't commissioned, but that could work. But then it was a good way to be noticed because sometimes it was rubbish, sometimes it was like, ooh, but who's this? Let's have a chat, etc. But one of the things that people do mostly, and you do too, Nick, is looking at Instagram feeds and pages. And I think so what I tell young people today, whatever creative side they come from, have an amazing Instagram feed because people don't Google anymore, people don't go on Wikipedia. I mean, people, when it's visual, they go on Instagram. And so if your Instagram feed is attractive, then you might have a chance to be called. But then, what matters is that you have to stand out and be really good, right?
Yeah, and Tom, you're a young photographer starting out. How do you approach magazines, or do you not yet?
Well, I don't. I think that the really important thing is to actually be shooting for yourself. And I guess, like you say, Mima, the biggest platform is Instagram. There's no reason not to capitalise on that and sort of execute that exactly how you would like. And for myself personally, I don't necessarily have that desire to shoot for a magazine for the sort of accolade of shooting for a magazine. It gives me a lot more enjoyment to shoot something for myself and put it on Instagram, and I still get a platform to display my work on.
So you have to wonder, if magazines are the right thing for you. They might be, they might not be.
Correct.
The Instagram and the internet in general is pretty wide-reaching. You want to work out why you're putting it in a magazine. Most magazines do not have that great circulation, so you just have to work out why you want to work for a magazine. I'm not at this point saying whether you should or you shouldn't, but I would say, just trying to support what Tom and Mima both said. If you're doing interesting work, people will want to see it. If you're taking amazing pictures, people will want to see it.
Call you in.
You have to be doing that. You can't just be a magazine page filler. Somebody who can do okay pictures, and it kind of, all magazines need their pages filled with something, and so they tend to get people in, but often they're not. I don't want to sort of generalize. My point is really, you need to be creative. If you're doing brilliant pictures, then everybody will have them. Sometimes I get asked, I want to work for this magazine, but that means I can't work for that magazine. If you're doing amazing pictures, you can work for any magazine you want. It'll all be fighting over you, and there is no reason why you can't work for different magazines unless you sign some huge contract and they give you lots of money to do so. However, that's not the case most times. Just do brilliant pictures. Really invest your heart, life, soul, everything in taking images and make them as strong and as important as you can, and that's the best way in. But keep on sending them in. And this is a slightly rude comment that was written on one of my Instagram posts, where I did a picture of from a live broadcast we've just done for Margiela, or with Margiela, called Squidge. And this is the picture I posted. And somebody called Brendan__ Holt wrote, "Why the flying fuck is this fashion?" It's a bit hard, Brendan, to know where to start, because it's done by one of the most talented fashion designers that the world has ever seen. That's one reason, because it's what makes fashion, his work makes fashion exciting and worth studying. He's incredibly well-versed in every form of fashion historically. What he's doing sells. The bag that you see coming out of Dior now, the saddlebag, John invented that when he was at Dior. He has created enormous wealth for companies like LVMH because his fashions sell. He's pushed the boundaries of what fashion is further and further on. The idea of doing something like this, and why you say, why is it the fuck is it fashion, is because images like this and clothes like this really push people's opinions. Otherwise you're going to end up in jeans and t-shirts, and that's not exciting or interesting. You want to have fashion that excites people, and if you don't understand it and find it offensive or find it difficult, that's a good sign. Part of what fashion does is to challenge and to push aesthetic boundaries and boundaries of taste. Mima.
I like when you say that's a good sign if it offends you, because I think in everything, if that offends you, at least we're talking about. But that reminds me of when contemporary art started to be something, thanks to the great Andy Warhol, and people were like, oh, I could do that, or what is that art? And that has changed, that has brought the whole thing forward. And it's so important for humanity, for society, to offend, but to bring things forward. And by the way, I don't think John offends. I think John's marvels us, but, there's some subjectivity in everything. But you said it right. If we all wear a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, then fashion doesn't exist as an industry. It's just clothes.
And fashion is about,
That's the difference, that's it.
Fashion is about self-expression. It's the sort of most democratic and available form to all of us to say how we are. We've all dressed in different ways today, which all says something about each one of us. So it's a form of self-expression. But as a higher art form of it, if you want, it's about pushing how the public sees itself, how the world sees themselves. Fashion is a sort of a mirror to our future desires, if that doesn't sound too bullshitty. It's a predictive art form. A lot of art forms are reflective, i.e. they kind of show the world as it is. They reflect our feelings about the world how it is. Fashion uniquely is a predictive art form, so it tells you what you're going to desire in 6 months' time. It's an interesting art form. I really wouldn't dismiss it. It's important in society and incredibly, in my opinion, incredibly important culturally. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
So it's important for people like you to document it also, so people like this can see it and we can discuss it.
Indeed. From the same shoot, from the Squidge shoot, which was a 2-day live broadcast, somebody called, I'm not going to try and pronounce this, Biljana Erdeg, anyway, has written, amazing, are you shooting on film with medium format camera? No, I was shooting digitally, weren't we, Tom?
Yeah.
We don't really shoot on film anymore. Realistically, we shoot everything digitally, but we use a medium format camera. We use often a...
Hasselblad 503.
Thank you, Tom. So if that answers your question, I mean, I guess the bigger answer to that is shooting on conventional analog film is I won't say it's a waste of time. There are lots of people who do it and love doing it, but it's, there's a filter on Instagram that does the same effect. So I just move on if I do. Anyway, so there we go. We're talking moving on.
So I'm going to go that way.
That's going to provoke a reaction.
Yeah.
So again, talking about Squidge. Oh, and from Biljana again. So obviously popular, obviously active on Instagram, on YouTube that day. How did you come up with the concept for the shoot? What inspired you to do it the way you did? It's a reflection of John Galliano's couture collection from 6 months ago, from July. Actually, it was an amazing, beautiful collection, which absolutely I fell in love with as soon as I saw it. It was, just to give a little bit of scene setting, it was John's, I did a film for John before that couture collection. John and I worked on a film together. He took some inspiration from the film, and that manifested itself in some ways within his couture collection. So you have a sort of quite a nice relationship between the photographer or the image maker and the designer, and that's you know, that's a nice relationship. You have that with a designer because you do something that influences them, they respond to it and do something which then you re-look at, and it sort of goes on. So you know, where the concept came from, it's merely illustrating John's collection, but I then listened to things that John had said about his collection and saw what it felt like to me, what it reminded me of, what it inspired in me, what it excited in me. And we were sort of looking at the collection in two ways, or manifesting it in two ways. One is AI, so we're looking at artificial intelligence to interpret the collection. We filmed a lot of the collection in great detail to hopefully feed into an AI to be able to sort of predict what perhaps John's next step would be. I'm very interested at the moment to be working with AI it's not create creativity, because A, it's a clunky sentence, and B, it's not quite what I mean. To produce creativity, AIs have been used to produce, you know, to play chess, but that's it tends to be a series of mathematical steps. But creativity, the sort of, you know, trying to get an AI, and there was one interesting one that I was shown by Yunji, our art director, yesterday, which is Microsoft, I think, sponsored it, but they recreated Rembrandts. So they went through and they looked at all the Rembrandts, and all Rembrandt normally does, you know, male subjects. They're normally turned three-quarters. They normally have a collar. They normally have long hair, etc. So it took all the sort of things that Rembrandt did, and they scanned loads and loads of his paintings, and they reproduced that, and they created a new Rembrandt from all the. But it was a series of, and it looks interesting. You go and look at it. It looks like a Rembrandt. But my thing to Yunji is none of those are all technical steps, and they're all things, you know, that he did with habit, but none of it is the emotion. And of course, when Rembrandt painted somebody, when he did a portrait of somebody, you know, he would have reacted emotionally to his sitter. He had a history of his sitter. He had a knowledge of what he was trying to say about his sitter. He had some sort of, you know, he had desires or loves or hates or rejections or whatever. So there's an emotional content to what he's doing. You know, he might have been incredibly in love with his sitter or hated his sitter. None of that is taken into account by AI. When you're making work, you know, you play a lot on nerves, a lot on fear, a lot on sensations of doubt, self-doubt often. So all those emotional things are very important in an artist's work. Often an artist is trying to prove their own worth when they're creating a painting, a sculpture, or film, or whatever it is. So it isn't just a sort of set of mechanical steps, well, I always stand this way. Anyway, it's an interesting thing, and we're looking at Marjola's collection to see if we can find an AI to put all the information we have and see if we can predict another one. That's if John agrees to it.
Can I also suggest that people interested in this, they should go and listen to John's podcast?
Yes, absolutely.
John, it's like the third time now. He does a podcast just the same day that he goes out with a collection, and there was an amazing one related to this couture collection, which was Autumn-Winter 19, so the last one. And I suggest you find it online. So
that's partly what the collection was about, an inspiration, and a second part of it is about the sensation of the collection. And I've got very interested and have been wanting to do a fashion film for a while, using some of the tropes of ASMR, which of course is a sort of whispering, that sort of thing, and touch and feel and all that sort of thing. So, but John's collection had a very tactileness to it and the colourfulness to it. As you look at those YouTube videos, which are incredibly successful, millions of viewers of people folding gloop around and that sort of thing, and cutting things, you know, with a bread knife, you know, like foam with a bread knife, or often women, but not always, whispering into a double-ended microphone. A really interesting phenomenon and hugely popular. So therefore I wanted to try and understand the collection within that sort of world, you know, sort of looking at the colours, the feelings, the textures, etc., and trying to find some sort of way of talking about it in those ways. So it's divided up into two things, ASMR and AI, so that's where we're taking the project. So this is going back to a panel that Mima chaired. Do you remember which panel that was on?
Yes.
Versace.
That was the last one I did, yeah, it was about Versace, and I think it was the controversy or the love of DJ Fat Tony, right? Yes,
so a friend of mine I've known since the 80s is a young man called Fat Tony, who is a DJ, a very, very good DJ at that. We're working together on a project for Showstudio, which will be airing very shortly. And I asked him to, well, Mima and I invited him to come onto the Versace panel. And somebody who's written called Andrew Bannister Bailey says, please can we have DJ Fat Tony on every panel? The answer is no, you can't. But you can certainly be seeing a lot more of him on Showstudio. What's interesting about Tony is that he's got a very wicked tongue. Is that the right way of saying it?
And free.
Very free. So he will speak his mind in a very witty, very acidic, and very amusing way. He talks a lot, and he talks very insightfully about things. So he's an interesting commentator to have on a panel such as Versace. Very strong health feelings and a lot of experience to back them up. So as much as we love him, which we do, he won't be on every panel. He'll be on some.
Also, I thought he was perfect for Versace because he has been, and he still is sometimes, very flamboyant. And, I would see him much better discussing Versace than Zegna. But I also have to say that I had plenty of private messages on my Instagram about this. And I could say half and half. Half of the world adored him and loves him, and half of the world is like, what the heck? He doesn't shut up, whatever. So, but we always love things that make people discuss. So, we welcome this.
Part of the ethos behind the panels is not just to show you, sort of well-established fashion journalists talking with great knowledge about fashion, but fashion isn't just about a journalistic appraisal of it. It's about how you wear it. It's about people who love fashion because they want to wear it, or models, or art directors, or photographers. All people like Fat Tony who do the music for the fashion shows, but also have opinion on it. So it's to give a wide breadth of opinion on what fashion is. And so we invite lots of different people on our panels from lots of different walks of life, but all people who know and feel very strongly about it. And tomorrow we have a panel on Berluti.
You're going to say it?
About Eric Dyer?
Yeah, thanks.
So we have the footballer Eric Dyer coming to join us.
Tomorrow,
So that's tomorrow afternoon?
Yeah, that's going to be a good one.
So we get lots of different people, and we're interested in all people's opinions on fashion, not just fashion journalists. So that's why we do them. So just moving along, I posted one of our recent fashion illustrators' works of art on my Instagram. He's an illustrator called, and I'm going to try and do him justice with pronunciation, his name is Yigit Kan Alpa. This is the picture that I posted of his. Every fashion week, we commission a different fashion illustrator whose work we like a lot to illustrate that particular week. So we have one for London, one for Milan, one for Paris, one for New York, menswear, couture, ready-to-wear. And we now work, as you can see the illustrations behind us, we now work with a pool of probably over 50 of the world's best fashion illustrators. So really exciting, and his work is absolutely beautiful. The question, however, on my Instagram from _JR8990 is, which of these were for sale? They are. All the fashion illustrations are for sale on Showstudio. If you go to shop.showstudio.com, is that the correct address, Bex?
Yes.
Shop.showstudio.com.
Yes.
Shop.showstudio.com. Then you can see our beautiful new site and look at not only all the fashion illustrations which are for sale, but also look about how those, something about how those illustrators work. There's film of them working, there's more examples of their work, there's quotes from them, little interviews with them. It's a really fantastic site. So if you're interested in fashion illustration, you should definitely go and look. And my personal opinion is fashion illustration is one of the great fashion art forms. Has been so important in terms of how we understand fashion. It used to be the way to show fashion before photography was so prevalent. There have been some incredible, and still are, some incredible, increasingly are, incredible artists, incredible fashion illustrators. And the artworks, I think, are accessible price-wise. And they are getting more and more valuable. So you should start collecting now. We have a show on which is on for another 2 weeks called 100 Women, and that's the show that's around us. And when you look at our panels, that's what you see behind.
Finishes on the 31st of January.
There'll be a show after that, but try and get this one.
It will be online forever.
That's true, that's true. So then moving along, so we started doing we had a little bit of a discussion at Showstudio. So we looked at how we were covering the shows, and I felt, and I think it was a little bit borne out with everybody else, that We used to do a written review of the shows. So our editor or our fashion editors would go to the shows, like every magazine does, and they would go and sit on the front row and look at the show and then write a report on it. Now, I felt, hey Tino, I felt that that was a little bit odd on an internet site. People read less on an internet site, and I'm not saying that's good or bad, but it's the truth. And I felt that perhaps having a block of writing wasn't necessarily the most Showstudio way of doing things, wasn't the most contemporary way of doing things. And if it's not being read widely, then it's not a good way to communicate. And we had very important feelings on the fashion shows, and they should be seen by the most people. So I said to Mima and to Georgie, look, we need to come up with a different solution for this. And Mima, you came up with?
Yeah, I just have to say that Nick and I had a strong discussion about this. I was against abolishing reviews. And I didn't immediately see that we could find a different way. And then when Nick challenged and said, okay, find a different way, the team and I came up with the idea of doing it in a car. And especially the most important thing is not the car and the movement, but it's to be the first.
Yeah.
So our pride today is that the shows are reviewed by Georgie, who's doing it very well, immediately after the show, and she's the first.
So normally you'd wait to see the review on whatever platform you see it on what magazines.
4 hours later, yeah.
And we've managed to get the reviews up straight away. That just other comments have come through, so I'm not sure I did or not, but just to say what I'm thinking about, they're not replacing the panels at all. The panels will still go ahead and still be, and they're not replacing the heads-to-head or any of the other discussions around the fashion collections. They are replacing the written word on Showstudio. I just felt that actually we are Showstudio. It's about a digital platform. We didn't grow out of become. We weren't a magazine first and then a digital platform. We've always been a digital platform. And so I thought it was probably more correct to do it by spoken word. So anyway, the first, I should also say, that and then we thought, okay, well, you know, when do you, in reality, when you go to shows, when do you discuss the show most? And everybody said, well, what happens is you go to a show, everybody sees a show, and they all jump in their cars, if they can afford cars, and then they go to the next show. And it's in those cars where a lot of the reviews start to form. So, you know, the journalists will share cars. I think we share cars with Love Magazine and Business of Fashion and all manner of different. So everybody jumps into the car, they all talk about stuff, and then everybody goes off and writes the reviews, partly from that shared conversation. So I thought, well, that's in the car between fashion shows is probably the time we should be putting out our reviews. So that's when we're putting out our reviews. Rolls-Royce lent us for London Fashion Week, they lent us a beautiful Rolls-Royce Phantom, which we sat in the back of. Anyway, so and I posted a picture of that on my Instagram, and somebody called IFBMB wrote in capital letters, which kind of seems like they're shouting, "No, the people who drive these are pushing us out of Europe. Think." I don't know. There's a chap called Matt who was driving it. I don't think Matt was pushing us out of Europe. I'm not sure. If either of you two can shed light on what IFBMB means, do you mean rich people are driving us out of Europe? Yes, you're probably right. The sort of, you know, right wing of the Conservative Party, a lot of people who've got a lot of investments, and you know, Brexit crashing out, you know, make us crash out. If it makes us crash out of Europe, will be a benefit for those sort of people. So they will make a killing out of the disorder and chaos that will ensue from a no-deal Brexit.
I need to be a bit political here.
Be a bit political, please.
Because if you don't like the rich, that's a different discussion. But the people that voted for Brexit are
not Rolls-Royce drivers.
Really those people. I mean, there's a huge bunch of people that feel abandoned and forgotten and getting more impoverished by Europe that have pushed us out of Europe. So I don't think it's Rolls-Royce fault or... By the way, it belongs to a German manufacturer.
Rolls-Royce does?
Yeah.
Maybe they mean that. Maybe they mean that.
I don't know, maybe.
German. It makes no sense. Anyway, I'm sorry we can't answer your question. We don't understand it very well. So here's an easy one to answer because it's got not to do with Brexit. So this is something I published on my Instagram just because it's a picture that I created, and somebody has written, so somebody called hello, HELLOO .creative, and how is this made? It's made quite simply. It was a picture of some fabric which had some little reflections on it, and I put it in an app which I use a lot called Glitch, and Glitch is a Russian app by Vladimir Schreider,
I'm not sure
I think.
That one.
Very interesting young man. So Glitch with an Action over the E is an interesting photo manipulation app which I use quite a lot. One of the filters on Glitch, which is right down the other end of the filter scale, is called Sort. If you press Sort, it does a kind of pixel drift or a pixel shear to the image, which is particularly attractive, and you can control that, slide up and down. It's super easy. So it's just made on a Glitch app on an iPhone. Thank you. So this is another interesting topic. This is a subject of something we do at Showstudio called Designer Download, which is when we ask a fashion designer to give us a pattern for one of their pieces of clothing. And we publish that pattern on Showstudio, traditionally at Christmas, as a kind of Christmas Day gift.
Yeah.
Say, here you are, here's a John Galliano piece of clothing, or Alexander McQueen, or Yohji Yamamoto, or the list goes on. And this year we asked the very lovely Iris van Herpen if we could have a pattern for one of her pieces of clothing. So she sent across the pattern. It was published on Christmas Day. And Tom here did some very fine pictures of a young lady wearing that piece of clothing so you can see what it looks like. A question came in from somebody whose name is written BBBEYL, sorry, EYAL 1062. And as she or he has written, is it supposed to look exactly like this one, or do we do our own spin on it? You absolutely do your own spin on it. We're not interested, the intention is not for you to reproduce faithfully the garment, it's for you to look at it, and if it's, if it's here, Iris van Herpen made it in chiffon, you can make it in leather, or you can make it, do absolutely what you want to it, and then send the pictures of when you've made it into Showstudio, and then if you win the competition, you'll be given a prize. I think that's kind of how it works.
We don't reward technical skills here. We're not a fashion school. We reward creativity, so you have to do it with your own.
And it'll go back in front of Iris van Herpen, and we'll say to Iris, these are all the people who made your piece of clothing up. Which do you think is the most exciting? So that's how we're saying, be as creative as you want. When we asked the House of Margiela, Maison Margiela, to give us a pattern, at the time it was before John went there, when Martin Margiela was at the house, and he sent in half a pattern. So he sent in half a pattern for a coat and said, we want your viewers to make up the other half. So it really is about that. It's about sort of, your interpretation of that pattern. Thank you, Tom. Thank you for doing the fine pictures. And what was the young lady's name in the pictures?
Instagram, I think, is Sahara_Robbins. Look her up.
For her credit, she did it for free. Jumped around in the cold.
Yeah, she was very, very energetic. She deserves a lot of accolade for that freezing cold morning.
Yes. Well, thank you for doing that. Going back, I should have got this in better order, but going back to Squidge, which was our live broadcast just before Christmas, on Martin Margiela collection, it was called Squidge, and somebody has asked me, somebody called JA.ME.SWALSH says, why is it called Squidge? That's how Mima said, listen to John's podcast, and it's one of the ways he refers to his collection. So it's the sort of feeling of Squidge. It's got a nice tact, which is partly what, as I said earlier, led me down the ASMR route for it. Thank you.
Thank you. You don't onomatopoeic, like squeak, like the noise.
I guess.
It's a certain material make, and then they squeak. I don't know.
Sort of tactile.
Sounds like tactile onomatopoeic, whenever.
I guess it's all part of that.
Yeah.
So then moving on to an exhibition I had at the Mass Gallery in Tokyo at the end of last year. And somebody called She Gave Me Gasoline wrote, were all the rose photos at the Mass taken with an iPhone? No, they weren't. There was 3 sets of photographs at the Mass. One were all the roses from my garden, a series I do on Instagram, which are taken on my iPhone. And then there was another one called Flora, which is a series of pressed flower specimens, which I photographed 20-odd years ago at the Natural History Museum. I went through the herbarium specimens of the Natural History Museum with my wife, Charlotte. There are 6.5 million specimens at the Natural History Museum, and we went through every single one of them and whittled it down to 40, which is quite a reduction. And they were all photographed on 10.8. And then there's a series of rose pictures I did where I didn't allow the ink, the printing ink, to settle into the paper. I allowed it to run off. And so they're like very dripping, very wet-looking, very painterly looking images. And they were all shot on an 8x10 camera. So 10x8x10 is the camera I use for most of the exhibition, not my iPhone, although the iPhone is part of it. Right, moving along. there was, just before Christmas, we announced rather foolhardily that we were going to be doing a live broadcast with Robert Pattinson.
That didn't go down well.
And then we were doing a live broadcast with Robert Pattinson for V Magazine, all of which is totally true and absolutely what the case was. However, somewhere in the mixture, Robert Pattinson didn't know it was live or whatever it was. So at the last minute it got cancelled, which is what happens, to be honest. You know, not every shoot goes ahead as it's supposed to. Sometimes people get cold feet, some people are just concerned they don't feel they've got the information. It's all totally fine. But literally, you know, 12 hours before we were supposed to start shooting.
Even less. No.
Sorry?
Even less. No.
Yeah, even less. Midnight the night before we were supposed to start shooting. We got a message saying that there was some difficulty understanding what we were trying to do, and he felt that he wasn't sure that he wanted to commit to it, but wanted to meet and talk, which is what we are doing now. I really like Robert Pattinson. I think he's a great actor and a very interesting young man in terms of how he uses his image, and he was very excited to do it. We're working with a stylist called Jacob Kay, and the proposal of the clothes was quite out there, shall we say. So I think Robert probably had some reason to be cautious of how he looked, because he was going to, a lot of them were women's clothing, and a lot of it was, you know, the image would have been quite pushed. And I think he just got a little bit nervous about it, which is understandable. I probably put it to you that if I asked you to dress up in women's clothing in front of a worldwide audience, you probably would think twice about it, unless, of course, you're a woman. But you might not. Anyway, whichever way around, before I completely dig myself a hole here. So the upshot of it is, yes, we still absolutely intend to do a broadcast with Robert Pattinson, who I think is incredibly interesting. We're just trying to meet him and talk to him and get everything back on track. But you know, the reality of life is that things don't always go as they should do, or smoothly, or as planned.
We noticed that he has a huge fan club because there were suicide threats and people saying, "Nick Knight, you're breaking my heart." So I would like to say that it wasn't Nick's fault, it was the studio's fault. These things happen. Nobody let you fan club of Robert Pattinson down. No,
but you know, also we just want to do great stuff, and you know, if he was worried about it, I wouldn't want to proceed with it. There's no point in coercing people into do something they're upset about or worried about, or even just need time to think about. So then, moving back to a series we do called In Fashion, which is an interview series, and one of the latest ones was a talk with Mario Sorrenti, who is a fantastic photographer, well known for his campaigns with Kate Moss for Calvin Klein in the early 2000s, I think, probably around there, 1990s.
Yeah, the one for Calvin Klein, I guess, even late 90s, yeah. But the interview was because of the launch of his book called Kate.
And Mima interviewed him. Somebody wrote on YouTube, somebody called China Death Crash, wrote, "Does everyone you interview in this series have fashion parents? Can you find a single creator within fashion who hasn't been born of some pure nepotism?" Which seems to me, I mean, with all due respect, China Death Crash, I've actually found it quite hard to find people who were nepotistically involved in fashion. You know, if I think about Alexander McQueen, well, his father was a taxi driver. You know, John Galliano. I mean, you know, most people's parents aren't, and my parents weren't. My father was a psychologist. My mother was a physiotherapist. Mima, your parents, if you don't mind me asking?
No, nobody is an editor or a fashion person. No.
Tom, parentage?
My mum studied at fashion college, but she didn't pursue it as a career. So
most people, I would say, China Death Crash, don't get into fashion because of their parents' connections. Or their parents' desires. And if you know, in this great scheme of careers that are on offer to people, probably if you go to your parents and say, "Oh, you know what, I'm going to be a fashion photographer or a fashion designer," they'll probably scream, you know, because it's not the best loved profession, fashion photography.
You should be a lawyer or a doctor.
Exactly.
That's a real profession.
So nepotism isn't rife in the fashion industry. Sorry, it's not really how most people get into jobs. So I think perhaps your question is your presumption is misplaced.
Because Mario in the interview he says, "My mother is a photographer. My father was an artist. His brother who died very young, and I'm going to see the premiere of the film about his brother this afternoon, late afternoon tonight." Was a photographer. His daughter now is they're a family of artists. It doesn't mean it's nepotism.
His sister as well is a photographer.
So anyway, but yes, obviously, as Mira says, you know, they're an artistic family, so it's not that much surprise. My family were more or less scientific, so again, not much surprise. Anyway, so moving along, back to my Instagram post, and I posted a picture, which I do quite often. I see a news story which either upsets me or angers me, or I just feel I want to just grab it and put it out there because I want to have, you know, I want to be able to say something. And on BBC News, which realistically is where I get most of my news from, they wrote something which said Japan to restart commercial whaling. Now, my gut reaction to that is I really wish they wouldn't. I find it awful, you know, with the way we're treating our planet. You know, it's upsetting these incredibly beautiful and probably totally also misunderstood animals, and you know, I just found it difficult. And just on a pure human level, I found it difficult that people would be eating these huge whales. And yes, of course, you turn around and say, well, you eat pigs and cows and chickens and all that sort of thing. Yes, I know, and it's true. But for somehow the sort of beauty and grace of the whale and the mythology around a whale and the fact that they're incredibly intelligent and we know little about them and they're disappearing off the planet, unlike chickens, you know, it just felt a little more kind of, it just upset me. I just thought, well, please, you know, can you eat something else? Because they're really beautiful, and you know, you see them being sort of dragged onto a boat with blood spurting from them, and yeah, it's just upsetting. I mean, perhaps it's because I'm getting older. I don't know, but I look at Instagram and I follow sort of randomly, and I look at fishing parts of Instagram. Have you looked at fishing parts of Instagram?
No.
People who go fishing.
No,
you know, there's a lot of people who go fishing and they pull out swordfish out to sea and these huge, you know, incredible looking fish, and you just think, oh, don't. Just leave them swimming, please don't. Just yank them out of the sea and hold on and go, look, I've got a huge fish. It just seems to me awful. It may be because I'm getting older and I'm sort of sensitive to this sort of stuff. You know, I'm particularly bothered about it. I'm not a vegetarian or vegan. I try and eat healthily, but it's not through moral grounds. And I don't mind, just don't have anybody kind of lecturing me on you know, the rights and wrongs of eating chicken or pork or whatever it is. So I don't have that influence in my life. I'm not particularly, you know, I'm a hypocrite on a lot of things. You know, I'll do one thing because of one thing and one thing because of something else. You know, you do different things. Life isn't a set of rules you stick to. It's a whole bunch of kind of contradictions, things that don't make any sense. You know, everything gets mixed up. But to stop blabbering, my gut feeling on this was it upset me to see the Japanese starting commercial whale hunting again.
There's a reason that it becomes a news also, you know, it's not, nobody's talking about the fact that there's cows being killed every day to eat meat. So that was abolished and now it's coming back and we all love a whale and, you know, so. I
should read you the question or read you the thing, so just so before we discuss it, because it has some pertinence to fashion. So somebody called Yasu.Sorimaki, so Yasu.Sorimachi, wrote, "We need to stop hunting more than what we need and forget not to appreciate the hunted. But what about your fashion industry that kills for fur? It's confusing that you start talking about whales out of the blue." So I guess it was not a pun on blue whales.
It wasn't out of the blue.
And you know what I don't understand. You know, I shouldn't talk about things that I don't talk about much. You know, would you just limit me just to talk about one particular thing? But I'm interested in lots of things in life. I'm interested in everything from mathematics to politics to everything. To be honest, every part of life is infinitely interesting. So I'm not going to just talk about one thing. So it really isn't out of the blue. It's just I don't post about it much. And yes, the fashion industry does use fur. And yes, I've tried throughout my career to either refuse to photograph fur or film fur, or to certainly limit it. I won't say who, but I was involved in a relationship with a fashion designer, a long-term relationship with a fashion designer, and when they put some fur in front of me, I was absolutely vexed about what to do with it, because if I turn down this campaign, it'll just be photographed by somebody else, so I'm not stopping the fur existing, I was very caught up because I really admired the fashion designer, and I felt it very difficult to photograph. It was just a fur collar, but I found it very difficult to photograph. But then, you know, it comes and goes, and as I said, you know, I will happily say that I'm hypocritical in what I do. I don't mean happily because I want to be hypocritical. I'm just realistic in that. And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But my desire is never to photograph her, and that's how I approach my career. Sometimes somebody does something, and it does get through, saying I never want to photograph cigarettes. You know, I refuse any cigarette advertising. But one of my best-known pictures is called Susie Smoking. So you get stuck, you know, you hoisted on your own petard, I think is the expression. This, I just included this question just out of pure vanity. I did a series of pictures for a gym called Equinox, and one of them here, somebody wrote called Dave at Denk, Daveatdnk, who wrote, "Why do you still look so young?"
Yes.
I saw your work for the first time in ID back in the John Richmond body map, Jean-Paul Gaultier, good old days. Barry and Trojan were stamping the clubs. Heaven and Wag Dodos were rolling on, and there was you, Stephen Jones and the rest of them. Anyone recall Bernstock and Spears? Yes. Anyway, so it's just somebody reminiscing, but I just thought it was nice, so I've included it. It's not really a question, just me being vain.
Well, why do you look still so young? That's the question.
That is the question. I look like the way I look. I mean, when I'm 60, I don't do anything to not look 60. It's just the way I am. And
it's fit and healthy. That helps.
I am. I don't drink. I don't do all those sorts of things. But I'm not particularly preoccupied with staying young, or I'd like to live longer because there's lots of things I want to do, and time's running out. But I don't have a particular preoccupation to make myself look younger. Anyway, right. So, talking of which, I posted this picture, which is just about the first picture I ever took. And I've been meaning to post it for a long time, but I posted it at the New Year. When I got to art college, Bournemouth and Poole College of Art, I came from science. I'd been studying medicine, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And medicine was really not working out for me, and I became really excited about photography. So long story short, I went to art college, but I arrived at art college from not doing foundation. I didn't train as an artist, or I didn't get, I was never in arts classes at school. So I literally arrived in photography to study photography, not knowing anything about it at all. So I started producing the images I produced. Anyway, the question here is from somebody called Marissa_PH1. She says, at Ignite, I would be interested to hear your view on the art school system today. Art schools, I think, between the 50s and late 80s were such an important movement and produced an explosion of talents from the fields of music, fashion, as well as fine art. Students were encouraged to intermingle with the different subjects and intermingle with the communities in the areas of each school, which created shared ideas and inspirations. This thought sharing no longer exists, so art schools have lost this unique marriage and have become a place to generate money for the institutions via extortionate fees without, I've gone cut off the end of the sentence, without any product at the end of it. I could go on.
Yeah.
I was at art school from 1979 to 82, and it was a fantastic time. They really encouraged us to be as experimental as possible. I had one lecture on day one, and that was it. I never had another scheduled lecture for 3 years, and I loved it. And I was there from 7:30 in the morning until 9:30 every night when I was actually in the town where my art college was. It was a very experimental. You were bounced from lecturer to lecturer. So you do a series of pictures and you take them to a lecturer who would say, okay, well, let's talk about, the history of photography and what references you have in here. And then you take the same pictures to another lecturer who go, do you wet your bed, or are you in love with your mother, or, whatever it was. And you take them to another lecturer and say, this is bullshit, why are you doing such crappy images, and you really ought to get out of the college. So you were bounced around from lecturer to lecturer and sort of stimulated, and to some degree at Bournemouth and Poole College of Art in 1979, you were aggressed. I remember my interview there, I sat opposite a lecturer called Mike Jaffe, who was a big, thick-set, shaven-headed ex-US Marine who told me that I was an arrogant prick and I shouldn't come to his college. And what the fuck was I doing, sorry to use language, what the fuck was I doing applying with the sort of work I was showing him? And I thought, you know what, I'll give you as good as I'm going to get. So I was equally as vitriolic and aggressive back to him, and they gave me a place. And that was the sort of tone of the art colleges in the time I was there. They were not a set of lecturers you had to go to and get marks and everything else. You literally were experiencing the combined knowledge of all the different lecturers. Mima, did you go to art college?
No, I read English and Italian literature, so...
Right, anybody abuse you verbally?
It's a very different system in Switzerland. I studied in Geneva, and university, you have rules and you have to have signature to be allowed into exams because you have done dissertations and stuff. So I have no idea how the art school system is here, and I've heard from people I know, young people, that there aren't really exams. Well, in my time and in my education, I had like sets of exams and I needed an average whatever.
I wonder how they treat them at Central St Martin's. Do you think they...
Well,
is it very structured?
One friend of mine and a little bit of Showstudio told me that she had the worst experience. I mean, some people are very negative. She says, I was there paying a tuition and never saw anybody. I had access to the rooms to do work, but never saw anybody. Other people are happy about that. My goddaughter went to Chelsea, and she hated the first year. I remember she was coming in tears to see me, and then second and third, she adored it. So I think a little bit is subjective and a little bit it's the school. But honestly, I have no experience whatsoever.
I think it really depends on who you are as a person.
Did you go to art college?
I didn't go to art college, no. I left college at 18 and went and started working in a studio in northwest London, where I met you.
Right.
And I started my sort of photo assisting career from there. So uni for me didn't really fit in, but my girlfriend is currently at London College of Communication doing her Masters, and she loves it, and she has done a BA there and a foundation there, and she finds it incredibly inspiring, and meets a whole range of people who inspire her. She gets to do loads of workshops which inspire her, but I think there's definitely this sort of squeeze on the tuition system financially, and I don't think that is necessarily good for anyone. You know,
it's tricky. I mean, you know, off camera, the part I waved in this because a friend of mine just walked in. Off camera is my daughter Emily, and she went to Westminster, I think, to study, and I was amazed at she got so few hours of tuition. I can't remember how many it was, but it seemed to be a paltry amount of tuition hours. And you know, as I said when I was at art college, I literally rolled out every morning as early as I could, so 7:30, and I would say that as late as I could. I was the first in, last out, because I just wanted it so much. And the lectures were ongoing all the time. So they weren't set lectures. They were, you know, you would take your work to lecturers and get some feedback. So, and she didn't like it at all. She didn't find it enjoyable or useful, or that they would teach it, because I think she was studying fashion marketing, and she didn't find that the lecturers knew half as much as she did. I think, yeah, and I heard from a lot, especially from my own children, saying, you know, we're saddled with a huge debt when we come out. You know, when I went to college, I was given a grant, and I had all my equipment paid for. So, you know, education was viewed in a very different way. So you didn't come out with debt, come out with a stack of film. So, you know, it's very different then. But I think, you know, the artistic spirit lives on, you know, and there are different ways and thoughts of teaching it. I think, you know, Wolfgang Tillmans went to the same art college I did some years after I did. So it produced people, you know, quite regularly who were good. But, you know, I was 60 people in my year. Through the film part of it. And I don't know how many other people made a career out of doing photography or film. I don't know what the success rate was, probably quite low. It's a difficult career to choose. So, you know, if the responsibility of the college is to give people a career, it's one thing. If it's to teach them about art and how to express yourself, it's a different thing. So, you know, the teaching of art is a difficult thing to do. You know, how do you teach somebody art? Isn't it about what comes from them? Do you guide them? I don't know. It's a tricky thing. So I do find, and I just don't know about how it's taught, how art is taught today. So I'm slightly under educated to be able to answer your question about education. So I'm sorry about that, but that's my experience of it. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Okay, well, this is a question that came in, or sorry, not really a question, but pages of discussion. I started following, every so often, I follow a bunch of people on Instagram who I have no interest in whatsoever. So because I'm playing with the algorithms just for fun, I'm not particularly paranoid, I start following people who play golf, or people who do bodybuilding, or people who do anything that I know, even nothing about or have no interest in. I follow about sort of 50 at a time, just to kind of play with the algorithms of Instagram, which isn't anything particularly serious, but it gives some background on this. And then I wipe off all those Instagram accounts. So I follow them for a month to play with the algorithms, and then I wipe them off. Probably has no effect on the algorithms whatsoever, but somehow I feel that I should do it. Anyway, so this Christmas I started following a bunch of people who do maths. And you know how you go and follow one person, it suggests other people say, oh, I'll follow them, follow them, follow them, follow them. And I pulled in about 15 different people who love maths. I don't particularly love maths. It's something I wasn't particularly good at it at school. I've never been particularly drawn to it, but it is an art form in itself, and my nephew is very, very good at it. Anyway, trying to keep on track with my answers, So I followed a bunch of maths people and physics people. One of them is called the.physics.guy, and he put a post up where he wrote on top of it, "All I want for Christmas is a rational view of our universe governed by physical laws." And I must admit, I just took it off the physics guy and put it on my Instagram. The point behind it is, I don't really believe in God. I'm not religious. And I don't particularly want my life explained through terms of religion. And I find religion's quite tricky, especially organized religions. I don't see how intelligent people can believe the world was created in a different way. I just have to back off, because I know I'm going to offend lots of people, and it's not my intention to. But if you have a right to believe in fairies at the bottom of the garden, I have a right not to. So, you know, it was just that. And the Christmas, of course, is all about, you know, Christianity and about Jesus and all those sorts of things. And so there's a token nod to it, and, you know, it becomes a sort of, you know, one understands it. Religions really are a way of showing people how to behave with respect to each other, how to be kind, how to be loving, how to be, you know, to respect other people's lives. That's the basis for most religions. So any religion which you know, goes against that. I remember in the 1970s, when I was a teenager, hearing somebody saying, "Oh, and the Christian tanks rolled into some poor part of North Africa." I was thinking, a Christian tank? What the hell's a Christian tank? Anyway, so I've always had this sort of, you know, of course none of us know what happens after we die, because we're dead. But, you know, you can either choose to believe in something or you can't. But just respect the people who don't believe in it or don't believe in the same way as you do. So one of our panels on Versace that Mima chaired, Mima with two M's chaired, and somebody called Art Castaneda, A-R-T, new word C-A-S-T-A-N-E-D-A, wrote, "Aside from Mima, why is it the British reviewers never like designers outside the UK? I've watched plenty of Showstudio videos, and Mima, two M's please, is the only reviewer that provides a balanced opinion of designers regardless of their country of origin." Well, Mima's very bright, but anyway. I propose that Showstudio start including reviewers from the Americas and Asia so that we get a different and fair perspective, just like Mima applauds designers who incorporate diversity in their choice of models. Showstudio should do the same with their reviewers. Stop living in the fashion bubble, folks. Practice diversity you preach. Are you up for the challenge? Dear Art Castaneda, we do. I always sort of find it strange when we get these criticisms, because actually, just go back and look at our panels. You know, we have lots of people from different continents reviewing, and I don't think we do believe that English designers are the best designers in the world, or we look at it in a nationalistic way. I think we look at designers in terms of design. Mima, help me out.
Can I try and answer?
Of course you can.
Well, first of all, yeah, I want to echo Nick and what we said already in the last edition of this Ask Me Anything. We try to put the right people on the right panel, but especially to invite, we take into notice what you say, you know, to invite all kinds of people. We are right now in the middle of trying to fill in a panel for tomorrow. People pull out, they can't, they cannot. Anyway, it's not that easy. They're not machines. We cannot decide exactly who will come. That's first thing. Second, I thank you for your nice comment about me. Probably because I have an accent and I'm obviously not British, you think that I'm the only one who... I don't think, I mean, of course, every country probably tries to be on the side of their creativity. And of course, British people grew up in a fashion industry that it's probably a tiny bit more creative, more pushing the boundaries, you know, and it's not by chance that the great, like Lee McQueen or John Galliano have been called into Europe to do that. But I don't think, I think it was by chance that you saw that there. I don't think that's what happened here, and especially this is not our intention. So we will try to invite people from every accent and every you know, provenance, but it's not always possible to do it the way you would like.
I do think this person's wrong in what they're saying, because they're saying, you know, that we always, you know, we never like designers outside the UK. We love Raf Simons and Comme des Garçons, Yojamoto, Prada. You know, the list goes on. I mean, so I don't, with respect, art. I don't think you're right. We just don't. You know, we just don't just promote British designers. I don't believe in national identity particularly. I don't like national identities very much. And there are incredible designers from every part of the country, from Vietnam, from everywhere. They're amazing designers from all over the world. From Russia, Gosha Rubczynski. They're amazing, which we go over and over and over. So I really don't feel that's a correct criticism of. Anyway, so not to get on, one last question, which is a simple answer. I just did a portrait for British Vogue of Hollywood actresses, of one of which is here, and Carrie Mulligan. And the question came in from AAALEXAND, Alex Land, who said, who is the designer for these clothes? It's the Row. So there we go. And that's the end of today's Ask Me Anything. Hope
Thank you.
Of use.
Thank you
very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.